that puts very strict time limits on. They're gonna come talk to us about that too, but if we want to extend time, one of the things was it was a short time frame for towns to respond.
Oh, well, there's two different things.
Okay,
There's a short time limit for us, the PUC, to make a decision.
yes,
That's typically what the providers will complain about. They'll say, that's not short enough. It doesn't comply with the federal preemptions.
okay.
The feds
Well,
want you to
we'll have you
make
come
this
up and
better.
talk about that.
Okay.
Because they are coming in next week. Okay.
Let's see what we can do to slow this process down.
We'll slow it.
Not slow enough as it is.
We'll slow it. Okay, so we are, most of us here. Senator Ron Hinsdale is here on the screen. Senator Bray will be here sometime. But I think you said there was a bill H70, but I've also been told that it's pretty harsh. The two sponsors had controversial cell towers going up in their communities last fall, I think. I got a fair amount of emails on them, and at least one, and maybe both of them, were proposals to put a tower in someone's backyard. But they don't own the land is where the problem is. It's like my neighbor's lot line comes, you know, he's on that side of the hill, he owns here, and he's getting paid, he's getting rented to give space to the tower that's 50 feet from my backyard and shading the first one I got, it was shading their berry bushes or something, so. We were just looking. I haven't heard anyone say we're not extending it. But we're trying to do some due diligence. The floor is yours, Ellen.
Okay, Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So yes, you have been discussing H110, which would just extend the sunset another 3 years. And in case you're looking for ideas, H70 is in the House. It was introduced. House and Environment and Energy took it up. They considered it. They were interested in some of it, but they were most interested in making sure the sunset might cross over. So it's got quite a few different aspects to it. It's a little bit of a few changes, but yes, I think the sponsors did have difficult interactions. And so it is broadly aiming, I think, to provide more protections for towns in a couple different aspects.
And I think both of those got settled.
It never came before the
They
PUC.
never came to it. So things, either they backed off, but the towers didn't go up in the backyard. So there may be problems, but there's process and then there's outcomes. And just because somebody proposes doing something that some or many people don't like, what really counts is what the final outcome is. Did, despite the objections of the entire town, a cell tower appear, you know, on the town green, in the middle of the night? So, and I hear complaints about proposals, but I haven't gotten emails about outcomes. So I assume the outcomes were okay. So, off we go.
So yeah, and I don't know how many, if any of the proposals in this bill would be of interest to this committee, but at least it's some options if you wanted to hear some of the things that have been proposed. Additionally, I can talk briefly about the shot clocks. at some point if you like.
Yes.
So I'll start with page
I know
70.
we've got an attorney for one of the companies who does this all the time, I'm told, coming in next week to tell us what they do or what it is. So you can mention it, but I have a feeling we're gonna get an in-depth discussion next week.
So in H70, the first change is on page 3. And so as part of the application under 248A, an applicant needs to address a number of criteria. A lot of them come from Act 250 directly, but there are also some other criteria. And so this would be adding new language that says an applicant shall demonstrate that there is no practicable alternative to the location of the proposed facility that will have less impact on the aesthetics criteria. So yes, I do think the sponsor, you may want to hear from the sponsor if you're interested in this, in any of these topics about where some of these ideas came from. But I think Rep. Dolan did testify that she was interested in having a demonstration specifically, that there wasn't an alternative site that would have less impact on the aesthetics.
Okay.
There potentially are some disadvantages to this. While it would ask the applicant to look for alternatives that may be better suited to address aesthetic impact, that could be a burden on an applicant to try to find an alternative site.
Okay.
And how many alternative sites do they need to consider? So there are some pros and cons to that.
Awfully subjective, to say the least.
Well, yeah.
Beautiful to me is not beautiful to you, and vice versa.
There's that. You want a discussion of the point? Because
I think we're probably
There's actually
going at a high
Scott-
level over with.
no, there
Yeah,
is scholarly
we're going
research.
to go at a high level because we end up with the town that is getting the tax benefit for the windmills isn't looking at the windmills. The town on the other side is the mountain who is getting no tax benefit is not looking at it.
Dollar generated.
Yeah, it's in,
Beautiful.
I have found, when you get into an argument with someone about aesthetics, and something that's gonna be visible to lots of people, they'll always say, well, that's subjective. And my answer is, yes, that's right. We settled that.
okay,
Now,
we're
Is it
gonna get
wrong?
back here.
and often they won't say no.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right, but it's
Okay,
So the next proposed change is somewhat related but different. It's at the bottom of page 4. And so one of the criteria now is if there's a proposed new structure, if it's 50 feet in height in a clear area, or it's changing what now is if it's above 20 feet of the average tree line height, it's changing that to if it exceeds the tree line height at all, then it will identify existing sites where the project could be co-located. And so it's shifting that to if it's going to exceed the tree line height at all, it has to go through this. And
so
so
they have to exceed the tree line height, that's what I thought. So that means
yes.
that, all right, so they would have to develop several, okay. All right. And I think technically, it's not just putting up the tower, it has to be within range of the area. I know we've had a lot of trouble over in the Gulch. Grantham, yeah. And I did get cell service down there the last time I went to my niece's, but when I went the year before, I did not.
alternate years.
It's alternate years. Yeah, well, it scared me to death when maps said turn left, and the last thing I heard was get on Route 100 and drive for 25 miles. And I figured that was the last I'd hear from maps, and then this voice emerged. And I had just spotted the turn, but the last time I'd gone over, when I didn't even know where the turn was, there was maps went away the minute you started down the gulch. So something has improved in there. But it is, at least it was a big dead zone, but to get a tower, to get signal into the gulch is a challenge. We've got a bunch of those. Okay.
So the next change is on an entirely different topic. It's on page 5. And so currently under the statute, there is a 60-day notice period that is required before the application is filed. And this is notification to the town and the relevant state agencies, as well as the property owners and the adjoining property owners. So the bill is proposing to extend that notice period to 80 days.
Is that where we have trouble with the federal shot clock?
So no, and the reason it's a notice period before the application is filed is because of the shot clock. So once the application is filed, the shot clock starts, which is why the notice period is beforehand, because once the shot clock starts, the application has to be acted on quickly.
Okay. So once they file, that's when the federal regs come in. And we now say 50 days. 60 days.
Yeah.
And that's when the official notice is sent to the town that they will be applying to put a tower next to the Chelsea School. Okay.
And so this is extending it to 80 days. And so one of the concerns the sponsor had was if it was during that 60-day comment period or 80 days or notice period, the town has the ability to hold a hearing on the application and the proposal. And so giving the 80 days gives extra time to hold the meeting. If, for example, it's during a very busy period, like the holidays or something, it's an extra 3 weeks or so that the town can hold the meeting.
I was thinking of the holidays, which it's, yeah, just hard to get people to come out. Okay.
So the next change is on page 6, and so we're still on the same topic about the public meeting. Currently, the statute says that if the municipality decides to hold a hearing, that they will request that the applicant attend the public hearing. This is changing it so that the applicant will be required to host the public meeting during that time period. And it's also saying that the meeting shall be held in the evening and have a remote participation option. So it's shifting the meeting from being held by the town and then requesting that the applicant attend the meeting, or it's shifting it to having them host the meeting. And then also making sure that it's at a time and in a way that people can attend it.
Okay.
The next change also related to this during the notice period, it states that the applicant shall complete all studies necessary for the application, including all site location options, aesthetic studies, propagation studies, build out studies, and evaluation of co-location options, and present them at the public meeting. So requiring that more research has been completed by the time that the meeting is held so that that information can be presented to the public.
That's a lot of extra work, I think. But, all right.
Yeah, I don't know the exact timing on when most applicants will have finished their studies. I don't know the percentage that won't have finished their studies by the time they are filing notice. Hopefully by that point, they have a fairly complete project proposal, but again, this is coming from the sponsors' interests. And so just as an aside, this bill does propose to extend the sunset 3 years. And then there are two other provisions. These are the ones that are maybe a little rough, that could use some additional
These are
polishing. Well, okay, so, I just read from like a language, grammar standpoint. So at the bottom of page 7, it's changing the date by which a party needs to file to intervene in the case. Currently, under the PUC's general procedural rule, it's a party has 30 days to file to intervene and participate in a case. This is extending it to within 60 days after the application is filed. So giving people more time if they want to join the case as a party.
So it's sort of 30 to 60 days,
Yes.
and that's after, this is where we're gonna have a shot clock?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so at the very least, for the smallest project under 248A, I don't know how many people actually intervene under de minimis cases, but those are issued within 21 days. And so I would miss that presumably. Additionally, the shortest shot clock under the federal rule is 60 days.
Okay,
So if someone files to intervene, it could potentially, run into leading to a violation of the federal shot clock.
and if you don't intervene for 60 days and the shot clock is 70, how do you? Greg, just for the record, just,
No, it's just correct favor with the PUC, just while you're on this provision, one of the things that shot clock aside, and Ellen's right about the shot clock, it does enter in here a little bit, but the underlying statute requires us in some cases to make a decision on day 60. We cannot wait for someone to file a motion to intervene and make a decision on the same day. That is impossible. So you cannot have this, you have to change one or the other. So that's something to keep in mind. This provision conflicts with the underlying statute. So
okay. Yeah, because I know you had a time frame, okay.
You're very talented to do it all in the same day.
we can try, but someone's going to be disappointed.
Somebody's always disappointed. Okay,
And then the final provision on page 8 is that this would award attorney's fees to a municipality that substantially prevails under this section. This language would need work if you're interested in it, but the sponsor was interested in having a way to make sure that if the towns decided to intervene in the case and contest an application, that they can have their costs covered if they successfully contested the application. So yes, there are probably some legal issues with this, but this was the idea the
you
sponsor
get
had.
awarded attorney's fees if you found to have done something wrong.
Right.
And just losing an appeal and having the utility have to move it 10 feet isn't really criminal. Okay. All right. Committee questions? No questions. Senator McDonald.
I've had couple phone calls from someone who's represented citizens in these hearings who would like to testify. Said, yes, I would be willing to testify. She wants to know contact numbers. which I'm gonna
Okay.
send.
Yeah. We'll have I think we're taking this up again next week, because I'd like to get this one out of here. Because I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
If we're gonna continue to consider this language, I'd definitely love to hear from technical experts about the tree height thing, that it's gonna dampen how you.
I think Greg did great.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I could go through this and point out some of the
Okay, go on
problems
up. That
with
would
it.
be good.
If
Yeah.
you'd like, I mean, I gave this testimony up in the House and it didn't go any further after that, but.
Well, the bill didn't go any further either.
No, maybe because of some of the problems I raised.
I don't think I think we're looking, we're just looking at what options are out
Right,
there.
there's some problems with some of these options, and I understand what they're getting at. I guess as an overall, so
Okay, yeah.
for background, I do all these cases at the PUC. All these telecom cases come to me, and I review them all. We very seldom get any comments from towns. Towns do not typically engage in this process. They're happy to let the PUC make these decisions because half the town wants it, half the town doesn't want it. They don't want to get involved. They'd
I want
much
cell
rather.
service, but not in my backyard.
Yeah, and maybe they want it, but they don't want to tick off certain people in
Yeah,
town, or maybe
yeah.
there's a person that's like, so they don't, the town itself doesn't get involved. We have had cases where a group of neighbors, maybe 4 or 5 neighbors, they do not want to see the tower. So they're unhappy and they will come in and oppose project, and we'll have a hearing or whatever it takes, whatever is the appropriate procedure for them. But typically, I haven't seen a case where a town's involved since, oh God, it's been years. There was a case of Waterbury, but that was many, many years ago. And that was that was denied. Also, if a town does get involved, 248A is rather unique. It requires us to give substantial deference to the town's opinions. The town does not even have to base its opinions on the town plan. They just have to give an opinion. So if they come in and if they come to us and say, you know, we don't like it. We don't like it in this location. We pretty much have to defer to that. So towns have a ton of leverage in these proceedings. So this focus on giving the town more of a say, I'm not sure that's the right place. But that's just as background. But I can go through some of the provisions in here and just tell you what the sort of unforeseen consequences of this would be. So if you go to page 2 of the bill as introduced, and Ellen has gone through this. So if you look at C, it crosses out more than 10 feet above the facility. So and this is for de minimis projects. And again, for de minimis projects are basically swapping out antennas on a tower or maybe a silo. So when you cross that out, it means that suppose the tower had antennas located at the very top and they exceeded the height of the tower by, I don't know, a foot or so. You could not now swap out that antenna and go through the de minimis review process. That would push it into a limited size and scope review, which is longer notice, much more information you need to file. And basically you're not creating any additional aesthetic or other impact. So you really want that project to remain in de minimis. That's why the more than 10 feet is there. So as long as you're not making the project significantly bigger, 10 feet bigger, more than 10 feet bigger, you get to use the de minimis process, which makes sense. We've had that for years, and de minimis projects are really de minimis. They have very limited impact on anything. So that's what this would do. It would throw that type of project into the bigger category, limited size and scope, or bigger. So I'm not sure you want to do that. I'm not sure what the reason is behind that. It doesn't mean you can extend the height of a tower. For example, I think people are confusing that. If you're extending the height of a tower, that automatically pushes you into the bigger one. But if you're just putting it in to replace the antenna that happens to exceed the height of a tower, that's de minimis in my mind. Anyway.
We want you to co-locate antennas on existing towers.
Right, you want to, you want to encourage that.
Yes.
So this would be discouraging that. And it doesn't, I think what people were thinking was that this allowed for the extension of a tower. It doesn't. That would be increasing the size of the facility, which would automatically push you into limited size and scope category. And there's more notice and all that stuff. So I think this was sort of a, maybe they don't understand the process kind of.
Well, we were told this was rough.
Yeah, there's some unforeseen consequences. It's fine. So page 3. This is where it requires the applicant to demonstrate that there's no practical alternative. So in real life, this would be impossible to do. I mean, you'd have to, basically, it's not limited. It would be the entire state, maybe the entire globe. It's not limited by anything. And so the existing statute requires the applicant to show that there's no co-location opportunities available in the area. So if there is some place, if there is an existing tower or even a structure, they could put that antenna on, they have to put it there.
Would that be like a silo?
Exactly. Silos are common.
Church,
The
steeples?
city center downtown here. Church steeples, exactly.
Yeah, we've got them in.
So you have to, right now, you have to show, every applicant comes in and says, here's my co-location analysis. I did a search ring in 10 miles and I can't find anything else to put this on. I need to build a new tower. So that's already required. I'm not sure what this is getting at. Maybe they don't understand how that works. But co-location is already a requirement in here. So any new tower, you got to do a co-location analysis.
Okay, but I have a feeling what they want is, well, if I'm proposing putting it within 10 feet of the school, is there some place within 50 feet behind the tree that I could do it?
I'm not sure putting it next to a school would impact any of the criteria.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Well, that was one of the examples, but when the town objected, they moved it.
That would be more of a concern about EMF radiation.
And we can't talk about that.
You can talk about it, but there is a federal preemption and we can't do anything as long as they meet the federal requirements. You can talk about it, nothing. But in that example, that would be more of a, but yeah, let's say a town says, you know, instead of putting it here next to a historic building, why don't you move it over there?
You've got to give deference to the town.
In that case, we'd have to give deference to the town, substantial deference, which is, it's basically the town said no. So a lot of these applications, if they are doing something like that, they have serious negotiations with the town, or they just pull it. They don't even pursue it because they know. I mean, these lawyers are pretty savvy. They know exactly what's going to go through and what's not.
What I've said is the 2 towers I got emails about last year, I have not heard that they went up.
They did not go through. I heard about those anecdotally. They did not come before us. They did not file advance notices as far as I'm concerned. Even they went into the town to see what the reaction would be. The town went crazy apparently, and they said, no thanks. They're not going to put them there. So
apparently they were a little more aggressive in their wording. I heard out of there. But
I've heard that, and there is a certain attorney, but I won't get into that.
can't change that. But
Yes.
the end result is the system worked. The town didn't want it, or a significant amount of people.
Yeah.
And the company backed off.
That happens quite a bit. I see that quite a bit. If a project is garnering significant opposition, the provider will pull it rather than risk ticking people off. Potential customers, negative publicity, they typically don't want that.
Especially in sales, there's competition.
That's right.
So if I don't like what you did to my town, we would all switch to your competitor.
Yeah, it makes sense. Anyway, let's go through. So that was 3, and again, you already have co-location requirements in here, so I'm not sure that that's necessary. Page 4. Sure, that's nothing. Oh, then page 6 and 7. Oh, so going from 60 days to 80 days prior. I don't know what that gets towns. Again, this is advance notice. I don't see any problem with it, but
I know it's stepped out of the room, but I'm pretty sure you just skipped over page 4, which has the tree height thing. It's the.
oh yeah, you're right.
The bottom.
That's right.
So the towers need to be above the tree line for better coverage.
Let's see.
So
Oh.
trees affect the signal strength.
Again, this refers to so if it does hit this, then you have to do the co-location. Pretty much every tower has to exceed tree line. They're all in a cleared area because they're in the woods. So every new tower we see has to provide the co-location stuff. So this really is, it's just unnecessary.
Yeah, so if it's gonna be above the tree line, they
Which
have
it
to
is.
provide co-location stuff.
Every new tower, practically.
Yeah, okay.
Practically speaking, every new tower provides a co-location analysis. So they have to show, hey, I can't put it on an existing structure or tower. There just isn't any in this area because it's in the middle of nowhere. It's
And
in,
it's gotta be above the tree line if you wanna get cell service more than 10 feet away.
it has to be because it's line of sight at some.
Above the tops of the trees,
Yes,
not the tree line.
what's the difference?
There, above the tree line, there are no trees.
Oh, you mean
Oh.
the tree line on the mountain, it's above the top.
The average tree height, yeah, so the tree line.
That's right. If you're going up, there is a tree line on Mount Mansfield where trees cease to exist, more or less,
So we're talking about getting
Yeah.
above the tops
of the
of
tree.
the trees.
You can see it.
Bill uses tree line. Yeah, but I know,
Yeah, there's two
How do
different,
they know
yeah,
what they?
two different, okay.
So then you get to page 6, and this is the part about the town meeting. So right now, if a town requests a meeting, they call the Department of Public Service, and the Department of Public Service arranges to have a public meeting in the town about the tower. Typically, the applicant will attend that because they want to present their side. But the important part of this is that it's at the request of the municipality. The way this is written now, this would require every application to have a public meeting, even the very, very small ones, because this isn't limited to new towers. So if you're going to do something like this, I would suggest you limit it to the construction of a new tower at the very least, because you certainly don't want people coming in or having to have a town meeting just because they're swapping out antennas on a silo.
Well, I mean, I remember the rash when they were changing out something, and people were concerned that they were putting 5G up there and not telling anyone. And they weren't, but we can't do anything about it, even if they were, because we can't regulate health concerns. But this could generate into a public hearing
On every single
on every
application.
one of those, and you can't tell the public when they show up, you can't express your health concerns.
It would be confusing at the
Yeah.
very least. And again, we get hundreds of these a year. So that's a lot of town meetings. So I think if you're going to do something like this, that's fine, but limit it to the construction of a new tower, let's say, at the very least. Because that's what people are concerned about typically. I mean, it doesn't make sense if they're coming in for something small. People are just going to say, well, why are we having a meeting? It doesn't make any sense. It's already there. The tower's there. The antennas are there. That makes sense.
My other concern, I served on the city council for 8 years. This is switching it from the municipality or somebody hosting the meeting to the applicant. My concern is, couldn't there just be as many concerns ways that the applicant chooses to host it at a bar and buys everybody free pizza and so on? I mean, we had that issue once that I don't know what the intent of this language is to have the applicant choose the means and location and the circumstances of it. And I feel like that's going to introduce.
Yeah, no, I think it needs some work, this language. As Ellen said, this is rough language, and But one of the unforeseen consequences is that this is all inclusive. Every single town. Right now, a town would only ask the department to have this meeting if it was a big project, if it was going to cause some problems in the town. And that makes sense. If the municipality, if the select board says, this is going to be a problem, people are complaining, let's have a town meeting about it so people get information. That makes perfect sense, but that's already required. So I don't know if you really need to do more on that. Let's see, the last part. Completing all studies. Honestly, I don't think that's a huge burden. They typically have all that stuff ready to go, but by the time they file the advance notice. So I don't think that if you wanted to make them do that, I don't think they'd complain hard about that. And then the intervention thing, I mentioned that. Obviously, we can't have 60 days of intervention and then issue an order, a requirement to issue an order on 60 days. That doesn't, obviously, it doesn't make sense. I understand, extending or giving people more time to intervene. That's fine, but you got to push everything else back. And if you push everything else back, they're going to push back hard on that shot clock issue, which I don't want to get into because it is an issue in a case I have, and we're getting sued and all that stuff. So, attorney's fees.
Yeah.
Ellen is right. This could cause some problems. Typically, what happens if the language in here, it would need some work. Typically what we do now, we use the American rule, which means that people pay their own way, basically. If you win the case, you got to pay your own attorney's fees, but you won the case. If someone is doing something wrong, like you mentioned, then the other parties could say, hey, wait a minute, they were doing something they shouldn't have done, and we incurred greater costs because of that, so we should be reimbursed. And that's fine, and we can do that already. We have the latitude to do that. So I'm not sure you need this, and it would need some work to make it legal. I'm not sure this is legal the way it's written, but Ellen would be better place to tell you about that. But so there you go. Some of there's a lot of unforeseen stuff in here, and I understand where they're getting. But like I said, as an overall thing, towns have a ton of leverage right now. The substantial deference under 248A it's really beneficial to the towns. It's unlike towns do not have that deference under 248. They do have some substantial deference, but they have to base their recommendations on the plan. Under 248A, there's no such restriction. They can just recommend whatever they'd like. So towns have it pretty good under 248A. It's just that we don't see a lot of towns coming in.
But you said towns don't always speak with one voice.
Exactly. It's difficult for a town. Yeah. And
Especially big wraparound towns where, what people that live out here by the Barry Fishing Bait Club, which is in Berlin, care about what happens in Riverton, which is on the Northfield border.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's hard.
They're different worlds, and a lot of Vermont towns are like that. They're large, they typically have little villages, and you care about what goes on in your village.
Yeah.
But not, we had a whole issue today with where did the Secretary of Agriculture live? Because he's always lived in Cabot, his family farm is in Cabot, but he's listed as Marshfield. It's the zip codes.
Yeah.
Cabot has several. Calais has at least 5. Plainfield has several. The towns are huge, and where the nearest post office is not necessarily in your town.
Right. And cell service is not bound by town boundaries, as we know. It's serving the entire state.
Yeah.
Hence the need for 248A in the first place. You want to bump it up to a state level where it is.
Sorry, I was opening your earlier testimony. A quick question. How many new towers are being sited here? It seemed like some of the permission and accelerated time schedules I recall for 28A was people were clamoring for better cells. So we said, oh, how can we permit faster? And
Yes.
I'm just wondering where we are at the growth curve of building out. Are we still in faster mode, or are things slowing down? And
It's steady. It's steady. But the vast majority, so we see probably around 100 applications a year.
for new towers,
No, 100 applications total. Most of those, the vast majority, I'm going to say like 80, almost 90% of those are de minimis modifications. That's swapping out of antennas for new ones, old antennas swapping out for new. And then we'll see a dozen maybe new towers a year. And that's been pretty steady. Yeah, that sounds about right.
We had all the FirstNet. There were 11 towers that were supposed to go up with that. I don't,
FirstNet was a combination. Some of the FirstNet is going up on existing towers because it's just different antennas.
yeah.
Some of them they are building new towers for. Some of them they were building the tower anyway, so they're putting the FirstNet stuff on it. So AT&T, Verizon, as you can imagine, they have plans going out years in advance. So they apply for things years in advance, and so the FirstNet, I'm not sure that accelerated tower deployment. It's just that they need to get it up in certain areas to fulfill their contractual obligations with the feds, but I don't think we saw a lot more towers as a result of that.
I think what we heard is this bill went in because two of the reps, they also happened to be in my district, had some tower proposals in their towns that were very unpopular with numbers, but none of those towers went up or went to the PUC. So, we hear about the problem towers, but the vast majority of those never go forward.
yes.
Yeah.
So in substantial difference, so in like the Act 174 energy siting stuff, town had to go through, get an improved energy element in their town plan, regional planning
Substantial
commission,
difference.
right, in order to gain that leverage, but no such burden of active planning to invoke a substantial difference. Authority.
Right. Nothing like that. And again, the substantial difference in that statute is based on the town's plan.
Right.
So they have to base their recommendation on the town plan, something in there, but 248A, not so much. They can base it on whatever they like. Zoning.
Is there any requirement when a company wants to build out in an area that they first examine co-locating?
Yes, we just talked about that before you got back. It is a co-location requirement in the statute right now.
And what lets them opt out of that? Like that the rent is too high?
Oh, like what would make it not feasible?
How they, I can imagine they might want to just always control their own destiny, not get on someone else's tower. They might want to build a tower and get the rent from letting someone else co-locate on theirs.
That's true. They have to provide an analysis, and they have to show the propagation from those various sites. So they have a coverage goal. And then they'll do maps, they'll do propagation maps from the other possible sites in that coverage area and show that, hey, we can't put it here because that site's too low. This tower doesn't have any room, so we're stuck building this new tower. Mostly what happens is there's no tower at all, given that this is Vermont. So there's plenty of places where there's just nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty easy to do a co-location analysis. There's no tall buildings, there's no other towers.
We talked about sidewalks and Church Street.
There's plenty of silos that have them. There's plenty of buildings in towns like
Church
Montpelier,
that's
but
getting more money than they ever made from chicken
Yeah.
pie suppers, since they've got an antenna in their top, in their steeple.
More profit hosting an antenna than selling milk.
That's right, and you most certainly don't have to peel a lot of squash either. So,
Then you have save the chicken pie suppers tonight in town.
there you go. So anyway, any questions for Greg? You have,
A couple folks have referred to towers and said, had expressions like, oh, but that was a lattice tower. And so what's the broad difference? What's the controversy about a
lattice towers versus monopoles.
versus monopoles?
Well, okay, so a monopole looks like a telephone pole, except it's metal. A lattice tower, or the classic towers you see, they're sort of, well, there's two different types of lattice towers. There's some that are sort of spread out as sort of pyramidal shape with steel struts going across it.
Erector sets.
I
Yeah, like an erector
think
set.
like the Eiffel Tower.
That
kind of a
that
pyramid,
basic shape,
yeah.
exactly, yeah, it is
It's
like
a
the
little
Eiffel
bigger
Tower.
than most.
Right, but they have narrow steel struts and, that holds together the elements. And then there's a guide lattice tower. So that's more of a tubular shape with steel struts, but it's guide with steel wires that hold it in place, because it doesn't have the large base that, more like the Eiffel Tower with.
Okay.
Like radio towers. That
Yeah.
Seems like they're often that.
Yeah, you see them with the guy wires. So most of the ones we see, I don't know about most. I don't know. There are some lattice towers being proposed. Mostly we see the monopoles.
I heard a description, and that was a lattice tower. We wanted a,
Some people, there are some people like monopoles. Some people like the monopines, as they're called. So it's a monopole with fake pine tree branches. You've seen those.
It's so ugly.
New Hampshire,
Yeah.
they, yes.
Some people
Looks like
love
a
those.
fake tree.
Yeah, like a fake tree. It looks very fake to me.
It looks very
anyway.
fake to me, it's
Yeah.
green in January.
Yes, so some people will say, oh, they could have done a monopine there, and would that have caused less visual impact? Hard to say.
so it's a aesthetic.
Yes, typically, but typically what you see, you have to keep in mind, is you only see that upper portion. So at that point, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. A lattice tower has more transparency because there's space between the strats, but a monopole is a nice sleek design. So, depends on where you're seeing it from and how much of the tower you're seeing.
I see a tower, pole, oh yeah, that's a pole. But then when I see that thing that looks like a fake tree, my eye keeps like, what is it?
Yeah,
But that I guess is personal taste.
we've had some towns request that, and
Yeah.
the developers have said, okay, we'll do it that way. So,
And finally, Madam Chair, maybe I'm not the one that should be asking this question, but you testified earlier that something about, unless the town just went crazy. What is, that was earlier.
oh, that was in response to, anecdotally, I heard that there was a lot of opposition in towns to those two there was one in Worcester and there's another one.
I think
But again, I
it's
wasn't
over the
involved in
Bad
those.
River.
Well,
Oh,
you
yeah,
just,
maybe it's Mad River.
you were characterizing a situation where the town went crazy.
I just meant there was a lot of opposition in town. I don't mean, no, not crazy in that sense. I'm sorry. You had poor choice of words. I'm sorry.
Not that you're usually a lawyer, one's lawyerly testimony.
I'm not a lawyer.
I
You
know.
keep insulting me. Why would you insult me like that? I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've gotten suggestions, we've gotten information. It sounds like the two that you could do, or the extending the notice from 60 to 80 days, right? And if you wanted to, and asking the applicant to have all their studies done in case there's a public hearing. I don't know how much difference that would make. I'm trying to think of something, not the windmills, that got built where there, I'm trying to think of something that's happened really bad. I mean, there's a lot of controversial proposals, but I'm trying to think of something that happened going through this process that was so bad it would cause us to say we have to change the process.
Like I said, typically, if they're facing a lot of opposition, they'll pull it.
Yeah.
Even if they're facing not that much opposition, they will pull it. I've had applications where I thought they probably could get this through, and they'll pull it. They'll pull it anyway. Which I mean withdraw the application.
Right, but that's not we're not here to pass legislation on the ones that they pulled.
No, I'm just saying.
No, that's what I'm saying is if there's a problem that needs to be solved, it's that something got through that shouldn't have. And I haven't heard that. I've heard a lot of emails of people where there were proposals that they thought would be terrible. But I haven't heard that any of those proposals went through. The recent two in my county did not move forward.
No,
So the system worked for the towns or the citizens. At least some of the citizens, maybe somebody else isn't getting cell service and they're not too happy.
Often it's not, the complaints I get are the opposite, which is it took too long, there was too much permitting, or the trouble, we wanted the tower because we want better service,
That's
and the
the other side.
troublemakers made it not happen.
Right, which is why the towns frequently don't take a
Yeah.
position because towns are frequently divided. Okay, you got thoughts? I can't think of any other things. Thank you, Greg. Our next witnesses are arriving, but we have 5 minutes of free time. Do you want?
Do you want to hear about the shot clocks or no?
No, we're gonna hear about
Okay.
that next week.
Okay. Good.
I think I just wanted to let people
Okay.
percolate on some of the ideas, and they're the most recent, that come out of recent struggles. To kind of percolate, but I would like to get this out of here next week if possible. I think I even heard something suggest we might extend.
Although it's a short one, and then you can annual return.
And unless we acted, it would automatically renew, which is what we just
The
did.
sunset, we go to 1 year for the sunset, so we could do it every year rather than every third.
Well, we can do what is it, we just,
We do it on
Yeah.
Groundhog Day, and match the movie.
there you go. We just, because we got bogged down in putting the percentage of the workers' comp tax rate that goes to run the workers' comp office. So now is if the legislature does not act, the same rate continues, because I guess during COVID, it kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I think that's one reason that the yield bill stays on its own, because some years it's been in the budget, usually when it's not controversial, but then the budget or the tax bill gets vetoed, so. Anyway, it's Friday, it's Good Friday, I was gonna try and get you out. But I've put on the end today, I wanna let you know about the outcome of the dispatching discussion with the committee chairs this morning. And then I had some further discussions with the league and with Maria, just to give her a heads up of what might be coming her way, so she could start thinking about reorganization. So I'm gonna move us through this as fast as we can. Ted Barnett, might
be a couple minutes.
okay, so let's start. Rebecca Samaroff is here, and Rebecca, we'll just move you guys along and see where we go. All right.
Great. Well, I'm Rebecca Samaroff, Deputy Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Taxes. Great to be here on the miscellaneous tax bill. So I was just going to speak to some of the sections that came up in committee questions in the walkthrough. I'll finish with just a summary of the technical changes around the taxation of alcoholic beverages, because we have Commissioner Knight here, who I think there was some follow-up questions about that. So I'll save that for the end, so we have a tidy transition there. So the first thing that I heard questions on Tuesday was Senator Brock raised some great questions about our extension of the property transfer tax exemption for controlling interest property transfers. Right now, there's an exemption that's permitted for C corporations, and our technical suggestion was to include nonprofit organizations who are similarly undergoing an organizational change. And you pointed to some legislative language I actually hadn't seen before, so I'm sorry I wasn't prepared to speak to it on Tuesday from the sidelines, but I've done my homework now. So you're correct that we added some language to mitigate the potential for abuse for this exemption, which is basically like a 5-year holding period after one tax exempt transfer. That would, be prohibiting, or would say that if the nonprofit then made another transfer within 5 years, that first transfer would be taxable again. This is like something we did to make sure there was no concerns about abuse for extending this exemption, but it's not, these are all kind of hypothetical situations. So if in adding this language to prevent concerns, we've kind of raised some new ones, we'd certainly be flexible in, either reducing that holding period to less than 5 years, or just scrapping it if folks are uncomfortable with that holding period.
Okay.
So either one of those would be fine, but also, we could always just, report back in either way and see if there's been any issues once we.
There's a nonprofit association in this state. They send me emails. I'm trying to remember. But we'll just see if they have any concerns.
Yeah, that'd be great to hear from a nonprofit in this situation on that.
I mean, things like the community action, I don't know if they were renting or owning, but I know CBCIC, which is now Capstone, and now they have a big building they own, but I think they own their previous building on Air, well, it was Air, and then they were on the Barry Montpelier Road, and those buildings got sold, so maybe we'll try Capstone and see. And I'm pretty sure they've transferred some buildings, maybe not within 5 years. Another one might be our mental health agencies that have bought more than one house in Montpelier, and I'm pretty sure in Barry and other places to use as halfway houses, quiet residences, and those they might turn over as the need, comes and goes. So those would be two, Jill. We'll see if we can get in on this one. Probably Capstone, and I'll go with Washington County Mental Health, and if anybody else has anybody, let Jill know.
Great, great. Yeah, we were trying to, frame this as a, anticipating a taxpayer-friendly position on a situation like this. So yeah, you're in front of those guys.
So you want to make it more friendly and just want to make sure it is.
Yeah, and then just to summarize the language that Senator Brock had noticed, the last time the committee looked over this was really that abuse mitigation language that kind of, just put some parameters around it, that if a nonprofit organization reorganized and then, received this property transfer tax exemption, because of that reorganization, then that would kind of be reviewed if they then did a transfer within 5 years from then. I guess I should say reviewed, and the tax on that first transfer would be due as drafted currently, but we're super flexible on that, so.
Okay.
Do you have a recommendation as to which option to choose?
Well, this was the recommendation from, we just consulted with a couple CPAs, and this came to us from one of the CPAs. I think there was some concern that there were other tax-free exchanges available to nonprofits. So, I think the CPA was considering, maybe reorganization that would allow a tax exempt transfer could be the first step in some strategy to push the property eventually to a for-profit company. But definitely out of my depth here. And when I talked to our legal team, they were, they've taken that advice and thought they would draft it to be, as protective as possible. But it's not a specific concern that our legal team has. So they're comfortable pulling it too.
All right, so there's no big abuse that we're seeing that we're trying.
This is all hypothetical.
This is hypothetical.
Even that a nonprofit would find themselves in a situation where, a reorganization would have triggered the property transfer taxes, hypothetical at this point. So
Okay.
just trying to, maintain equity. So there were also two sections that the department got pinged on related to our PDR technical proposal. So I'll just put on my PDR hat for this because our PDR director is in a day-long meeting with municipalities right now. So one of the sections in question was section 8, and this was a technical change to just tighten up the statute language so it pertains to our current electronic best practices around data sharing. This would repeal language requiring the PDR to maintain a duplicate copy of municipal grand lists in a centralized file. It talks about giving the file to towns for like a reasonable cost and supplying the grand list to others for a reasonable charge.
This is like when I used to have to go get the voter list and it would be that thick.
Yeah.
And now they can just email it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, or like on a compact disc or something. So for several years, we've maintained electronic copies of the grand list and provided them to folks for no charge. There's a link to request that right on our website. You can get it through an FTP server, which is a little like more tech savvy. So we also do have the option to provide it on a CD-ROM, but that is all free of charge. There's an easy portal for requesting that on our website. So and our grand list records go back, many more years than just 2 years, like I think back to 2003. So, this is kind of part of the overall cleaning up obsolete language that doesn't reflect our current electronic records. So happy to answer any more questions on that, but I don't think it just feels like outdated language and taking the advantage to clean up some statutes here. Similarly, section 9 updates some language around current use enrollment notifications. This piece of statute speaks directly to certified mail a lot, which is something that both our department and the recipients of said mail would like to avoid from our experience. It just really slows down a slow postal system even more, and it's very cumbersome for folks to get enrollment notifications and other notifications about their current use parcel in a timely way. There's also a section of this that repeals language about making sure we're sending towns records of their current use parcels by mail, but we have our new VTPI system, which just shares this through a web portal automatically, and then also for over a decade we've been sending those files to towns electronically anyway. So again, just kind of cleaning up that mail post language. So it looks a little more exciting than it is. And then the one more section that I wanted to take the opportunity to bring up here is section 12 of the miscellaneous tax bill. This is a proposal that we had to apply, this, I guess, big picture, this relates to part year residents of Vermont, and part year residents, you can think about someone who's either in their first year of living in Vermont or in their last year of living in Vermont. So their residency is split between 2 states, but for at least part of the year, they were a Vermont resident and taxed as such. So we have these like 3 great, robust, refundable tax credits now: the child tax credit, earned income tax credit, and the child dependent care credit, all which got a little boost from last year's big tax package. So our recommendation here is to make sure that for part year residents, the scaling of those credits works the same way across the 3 credits, because often, you know, complexity can be a barrier for folks, you know, filing and claiming things. And right now, under current law, each of those 3 credits scales slightly differently, but it's so subtle that making these adjustments is a de minimis tax change, but JFO has agreed with us in that estimation. So in section 12 right now, House Ways and Means kept in the piece of our technical correction that adjusts the child and dependent care credit. So it scales the same way as the child tax credit when it comes to part year residents. But our original proposal also asks for that change to be made to the earned income tax credit. They ended up pulling out that piece of language because they're working on a separate earned income tax credit bill. And like, if that bill passes, then we'll have all 3 components of this technical correction passed, and that'll be great. But, you know, just to be safe, I would love for that EITC language to be added back into the miscellaneous tax bill, because the goal here is really to have like one streamlined scaling mechanism for part year residents who are getting these 3 credits, instead of, you know, making them recalculate their income like subtly differently for each one.
And that's section 12.
Yeah, so section 12 right now only talks about the child independent care credit.
Okay.
But in our original version of the you know, our miscellaneous tax technical asks, which are actually in H157.
So House took these out, took the other ones out?
Yeah, just took the EITC piece out and they put it in a standalone earned income tax credit bill with some other earned income tax credit changes that they're working on.
Okay.
So if, you know, if that bill goes through, then, you know, all of our dreams come true in terms of simplifying our forms in this way. But if the committee was open to it, I would love to add the EITC.
This would be adults and
back in.
suspenders.
Yeah.
So I heard you say child and dependent care, which is another tax credit,
Mhm.
and the child tax credit
That's the big
is
new one.
possibly going away.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we don't have to worry about that next year.
But this would be applying that same, so just like, you know, so you guys know what I'm talking about, the scaling mechanism for the child tax credit basically says, you know, here's your child tax credit. Now you scale it down by the ratio of, you know, the income you earned while you were a resident in Vermont to the income you earned overall.
And you'd just like us to put EITC back in.
Yeah, and it's really, we have language that exists in H157, and it's really as simple as crossing out the word earned in section, in 32 VSA 5828E, which I'm, you know, happy to work with Abby on if you
just
guys
get
are
that
open to that.
Abby to-
Yeah. And this is a de minimis change for individuals. We looked at it over the last 3 tax years and it was less than $4,000 revenue difference, and it changed year over year, whether it was a revenue gain or revenue loss, because we're talking like, you know, cents on the dollar for individuals. The change would be multiplying their credit amount from a percentage of their earned income in Vermont to just their income overall. So it's, you know, it's kind of like, looks like semantics in the statute, but it means we have to have a separate calculation on the form for it. So like one more for a part year resident to jump through. Great, so I'll reach out to Abby on that one. That's awesome. And then just to queue up the next piece, I know that you had invited Commissioner Knight from DLL in to speak to some of our technical changes around the meals and rooms tax statute. So I just thought I'd summarize them quickly here, because the last time we talked about this was back in September, so just maybe for everyone's benefit. We have one technical change in section 4. And this is related to alcohol that's sold on the premises of a combination brewery retailer or another, like a brewery or like another business that creates their own alcohol, like a distillery or something. Our meals and rooms tax statute really only contemplates the on-site sale of alcohol for immediate consumption, but doesn't contemplate a situation where you could be, at a brewery, in their bar space drinking a beer, but then when you leave, you go to a different retail area and pick up like a 6-pack to go. In our statute, it kind of, the wording of the statute would make it seem like anything sold in that brewery was subject to meals and rooms statute, even though we're very, we have plenty of evidence that the situation on the ground and kind of like the logical tax treatment of sales like that would be you charge sales tax for something that's like a grocery style to go at an item if you're not going to drink it there on premises. So we just wanted to clarify that in statute because sometimes our auditors can get into awkward positions if they're in an audit
This is
situation.
starting to sound like if I buy a bag of potato chips and eat it with my sandwich, it's rooms and meals. If I buy the bag of potato chips and take it out of the front door, which for many of our little, very busy, at least they used to be at lunchtime, it was pretty hard to know if you were eating it with your sandwich or taking it home for an after-school snack for your kids. And yes, it did lead to at least one set of auditing issues.
Yeah, but that's totally a great analogy, right? It's like, yeah. So in this case, yeah, it's about the beverages that are consumed
We'll
on
go
premises.
into
Yeah.
to Senator Vaz's paper.
Okay.
Do you drink it or is
Yeah.
it cooling your beer in a freezer? It's
Right. So be
the
clear.
commissioner said it is taxable, thus it is taxable.
Right. So clarifying this in statute would be like one, conforming to what our understanding is of like what businesses are doing on the ground. We just want to make sure that our auditors aren't dinging people unnecessarily by following the letter of the law. And it's also because it's what's happening on the ground already.
Yeah.
JFO has agreed,
The
no revenue
letter of law
impact.
should be clear, so that you shouldn't be thinking you're following the letter of the law and find out you're not.
Yeah, and really this is like, it's just the industry advancing past, situations that statute had considered before. So.
We keep changing the types of liquor establishments. We've got a few more going on in economic development.
So here, well, I'll pass those questions.
That is a
on.
rapidly evolving field.
Yeah,
Before, I hate to keep kicking over dead horses here, but I'm going back to section 11 on this refund thing. I still don't entirely understand why we would continue to do this. You mentioned that a CPA had suggested that maybe these transactions could be a prelude to ultimately creating a taxable entity or taxable situation.
that was my understanding of the concern.
But wouldn't that be the point at which you would assess some sort of tax for doing the transfer?
Yeah, that
Why-
second
Why
transfer.
why would you assess a tax for doing a transfer that is by its definition exempt because you've done it a second time? I'm just trying to understand the rationale for doing this in the first place.
Well, I know that the language that was used to put this like holding period in is something that was, that has been used in other areas of the Internal Revenue Code. So it was kind of lifted.
Base anything on that.
Yeah, okay, fair. Yeah, I like to hold ourselves to a higher standard as well. But for conformity.
I don't understand why you make a non-taxable transaction taxable because a person has done it twice. I'm just having a hard understanding why you would do that.
Well, I would love to pull it rather than dig into like
I
the rationale.
don't get that
So,
idea. Is it just unless there's some real rationale, it doesn't seem to make sense.
I think it was like an attempt to make sure that this expansion didn't seem like it was, reckless or without bounds. And, but we did not get a lot of concerns from this. We sent it around to the real estate bar. This was not something that folks were.
I wouldn't
concerned
imagine
about.
this would be something that happens very often.
No, and like that, we don't even have like clear examples of it. It kind of came up as a hypothetical in our legal
Yeah.
division. Just want to make sure nonprofits aren't getting, short drifted where a C corp could do
I
it.
would suggest that we just drop that if there's not a better explanation as to why we're doing it.
Yeah, so that would be dropping like the sub 2
Yeah.
of that section 11, and we have no problem with that if that's the direction the committee wants to go to.
The second question I had is we talked about refund of sales taxes for other than the vendor, in other words, from the customer. And I did take a look at the form and I
Yeah.
see that you have revised the form and allowed for customer. There's no instructions.
Yeah, well, that's.
You can't find anything that tells anybody, A, that they can use it, or B, how to use it.
I was trying to squeeze in a little too much this morning, and I actually have an open email to you right now that's like has the new form attached and says we are updating the instructions right now.
Okay.
Because part of the, as you saw, I'm sure there's a place for individuals to put in their social security number, and now we're adding a piece to the top of the instructions that says that this is not only for businesses who have miscollected and then remitted tax and error, but also for individuals who have been mischarged tax and haven't been able to get a refund yet. So I'll pause on sending that to you until I have a draft of the instructions.
Thank you.
But yeah, really, I appreciate your vigilance here because this is, improving tax instructions is something I think we could all spend the whole rest of our week on, and just be a drop in the bucket.
And if the committee has no objection to that, I think and cancel having, we might still want to have a couple of the nonprofits come in and talk to us.
I don't, unless, I don't see,
I,
it was just really, that was the only place, unless somebody else had a concern, that was
okay,
the only place that I just kept getting
Okay.
stuck.
so we can consider that done.
Yeah, there is, part of the reason why I'm so comfortable with this too is because there's another piece of the statute that, I don't have the language super handy, don't want to multitask, but it says like, this exemption will be used if the, commissioner determines it's not being used for tax gimmickry. So I feel like we have kind of like some,
Yeah,
a backstop if something's going on that just feels fishy to the tax department. So,
Yeah. okay.
Great, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no other questions?
I'm going to move us along because I want to get you home, so I'll get commission.
Thanks for
Now, you're Commissioner Mara, that's right, is Mara here?
Yeah, and Ted Snow here on Zoom too.
Okay, I don't think we're gonna get to Ted today, so thank you, Ted. And Mara is next on the agenda. Would it be okay if I take her first and then you can stay in your chair? Or do you have a deadline?
I have whatever the Madam Chair wishes. It's up to you. I thought my piece was short. I don't know how
Okay,
short Mara's piece
We'll
is.
we'll do yours. I don't think we have much in here
Look at
today.
her eyes, Madam Chair, she's pleading.
Okay,
Thank you.
so where are we?
Okay, I was asked, I believe my name is Wendy Knight. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery, and as the Deputy Commissioner of Tax pointed out, we had conversations in September just to clarify the industry business practice around the technical corrections they wanted to make to clarify. So I confirmed with the manufacturers, the breweries, the cider makers, the wine makers, their practice is there's the meals and rooms tax when you're inside the restaurant having, a beer or a glass of wine with the food. And then if you go to the separate part, like Lawson's, you go to a different part of their establishment and you pick out a 4-pack in the cooler, and that's a sales tax as opposed to the rooms and meals tax. What gets a little bit confusing during COVID is this talk about to-go beverages and takeaway, right? So the way we did it during COVID was that the governor had an executive order that permitted alcohol with food to be taken away, right? People didn't want to, we couldn't, every restaurant and brewery was closed down, but we wanted to allow them to have some commerce. And so you could go with your mask down and pick it up, curbside, not touching anything, that. So what happened, remember all that, those good old days? So literally when it was curbside pickup. And so in 2021, the General Assembly passed Act 70 that allowed what we call the to-go alcohol beverages and curbside pickup. So the to-go alcohol beverages were meant for first and third class licensees, bars and restaurants. And it permitted them to sell with a food order, like people wanted to go get a burger, but they were like, all right, great, I'm here, I'll have a cocktail as well. You took the burger and the cocktail and you went and you enjoyed it at home. Curbside pickup was allowing for retailers, package stores.
Yeah, we might get the driver license fee out. It'll
So-
take a couple minutes.
Sorry, I'll try to be quick.
No,
So
they're trying to go home too.
that bill, Act 70, allowed those two situations, the to-go beverage, the curbside beverage, for 2 years. That sunsets this July. In the current liquor omnibus bill, there's a provision to extend that permanently. Sorry if that's my
And
fault.
what tax goes with that?
That is the rooms and meals tax,
It is-
because
it
it's
is the-
it's purchased at a on-premise, right? You would just, the same as if you're consuming it on the premise of a restaurant or a brewery, you're now just consuming it at home because we've allowed those
Mhm.
provisions
Yeah.
post-COVID. So there is a study that the department's prepared, and we submitted it to House Government Ops, Senate Economic Development, and I actually just forwarded it to you as well. And this is what we talked about, Senator, in your committee recently, and a little bit of activity, it's modest sales, it helped boost some of the sales, it's very convenient for consumers, and our recommendation is that there's no reason why we wouldn't suggest that that be extended indefinitely. So that's the extent of my testimony. If you have any questions, I'm happy to clarify.
Okay,
Okay?
don't see any.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for letting me.
Okay. Mara, thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Maura.
And I'm going,
Of course.
yes, I've got your initials next to section 13, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me here. And I'll be very quick but yes, we are talking about section 13. I'm Maura Collins. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. There is a document in on your committee website, which is 2 pages. It's called Affordable Rental Property Tax Reduction. This was something that was passed, I think it was 2014. And when the state switched to homestead and non-homestead tax rates, commercial properties are non-homestead taxed. And so affordable government subsidized rental housing are non-homestead. And at the time, the legislature wanted to accommodate the fact that government supported affordable rental housing would not be able to pass on the increase in property taxes as a result of this legislative action, because the rents that they set are capped based on federal government rules. And there's lots of different affordable housing programs, so they don't all set rents in the same way. Most of the time it's set based on HUD's area median income, and folks pay a percentage of that. Other times there are other things that HUD or rural development does to set rents. But the point being, which is that if going to a non-homestead rate increased property taxes, that these projects would not be able to pay that easily. And the legislature at the time in 2014 asked for VHFA to help the tax department and to be the entity that certified what was government sponsored affordable housing, where there was no ability to pass this increase on to tenants. And with that, since then, every year, VHFA has been certifying hundreds of housing developments. And the benefit that they get is that they can get up to a maximum of a 10% reduction in their assessed value if 100% of the building, all the units, were affordable. And it's prorated as a proportion of the number of affordable units to market rate units. So it's not always 10%. And so the property owner gets a certificate from VHFA. That certificate actually lasts for 10 years because affordable housing often has, the housing has to be affordable for well more than 10 years. It's like in perpetuity, or at least 30 years, something like that. And so these buildings have this certificate, and they can go to their town clerk each year and they can say, I'm still affordable housing. See, VHFA is telling you that. And their assessed value goes down by 10%. The issue with this is that the first developments to receive the tax reduction did that. I keep saying 2014, and I'm actually older than that. So it was 2004. I actually joked in Ways and Means that I am now of an age that I can say, I remember 20 years ago when we put this law into place, and it seemed brilliant at the time. But what it did was it said starting in 2004, VHFA could look at the properties and see if they were affordable and give them a 10-year certificate. And then it says under the statute that we can do that again. But I can't tell you why. We all wrote in the word, you all wrote in the word, once. It says that it could get this benefit for 10 years, and then they can come back to VHFA, and once more we can do this. And so why I'm here today is because those projects that are affordable housing and have been for the last 20 years, coming up in April of 2024, they will no longer be able to get such a certificate from VHFA, and they will no longer be able to get such a reduction on their property taxes. Interestingly, this is not considered a sunset. This provision is not going away in law. So last year, this year, next year, as new affordable housing comes online, we will continue to certify those as eligible for this program. So this is not asking for an extension of a sunsetted program. It is asking for a continuation of a program for these properties. And I want to point out what kind of properties would need this for more than 20 years. Honestly, it's the ones that are doing a really good job of living within their means and not being recapitalized. Meaning, if a housing development was built in the early 2000s and it has gotten 20 years in, along the way, some of those projects may have recapitalized and gone back to public sources like VHFA or VHCB, and may ask for additional money so that the housing can be redeveloped and energy efficiency be done and refreshed in many ways. In doing so, that development is going to apply to be sold to a new partnership legally. And by selling that to a new partnership, that's a new owner, and they restart the clock for this 20 years. So the developments that have been going along for 20 years and not recapitalizing, but living off their reserves and not asking public sources for anything more, are the ones that are at risk of losing this benefit. And so since 2004, when this began, there's been about 477 properties with just over 12,000 units that have benefited from this tax break. And we have been looking at, there's a chart, and I'm happy to share my screen if you want to see it, the number of homes that have gotten this benefit by county, but we are at risk of having hundreds of projects no longer get this benefit if we don't change the language. And so the language in section, 13, is quite literally saying, crossing out the word once and saying that the certificate of exemption may be renewed after 10 years and every 10 years thereafter, if VHFA finds that the property continues to meet the requirements. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions or dig into any parts of it.
So there's money that's not being collected for the ed fund for the municipalities. The trade-off is you're getting affordable housing. But they've gotten a break for 20 years. I guess their mortgage is paid off or close to paid off.
And some of these properties never had mortgages. I'll say that the typical Vermonter living in these buildings affected by this has an income of about $17,000 per household. And the tenant paid rent is $423. And that household has an average of about 41 years old. So these are, again, when I say government subsidized affordable housing, this is very low income housing.
Is what we're trying to prevent, though, given potential rents, that these would be turned into market rate. Is that the risk there?
No, there still would be legal protections to ensure that these operate as affordable housing. We run the risk that it would put further strain on the budgets of these properties, so they couldn't keep up with ongoing maintenance, and they would be more likely to need to come in to be recapitalized sooner, and this would drain the reserves. And there are just about 5,100 apartments in 203 different properties at risk of this next year. And then by 2028, that'll grow to about 6,600 apartments that'll no longer have that benefit. And it'll continue then to be more and more that as more hit the 20-year clock, we'll get up to all of the properties not being eligible for this.
Okay, any questions for Laura? Senator McDonald.
So, Madam Chair, you were asking about how they fit in with, we used to have affordable housing that was subsidized, and after 20 years, the owners would ask the subsidized tenants to leave.
Yeah.
And convert the apartments to condos or whatever. Are these the type of apartments that we
I
are?
think I heard no, that these are not.
It's a mix. It's a mix. So it would be during the time that they are government, for the time that they are affordable housing, they would be eligible and qualified. And then if they ever change use, the way you're describing, Senator, then they would no longer be eligible for this benefit. This provision doesn't put any kind of restriction on extending that clock in any way. And of the affordable housing in the state, the majority of it is not under the program you're referencing, which is an old Section 8 program that was popular in the 70s when we had a lot of construction. Instead, the most popular program now is through the federal tax credit program, and that requires usually perpetual affordability. And so a lot of this housing isn't going to convert to market rate, but there are some in here, and I can't tell you the number off the top of my head, that are still in that every 5 or 10 years, they come up for renewal with HUD contracts, and they have to actively do that renewal to stay affordable housing. That is a whole separate conversation that BHFA manages a preservation committee where we are actively watching for what properties are at risk of converting to market rate and acting in the state's best interest in those situations.
Okay, but the minute this benefit doesn't last for 10 years, even if it gets sold and goes market rate in year 1, it goes away when it goes to it ceases to be affordable. Then that property tax benefit goes away. Okay. Senator Brock.
Is there any geographical concentration as to where these properties are located?
Yes. Chittenden County, as per usual, is the highest. And then otherwise, it's distributed across the state. And that's, you want me to share my screen real quick? I can show you a chart. Oh, it's disabled. But in the attachment, there is a chart that has it by county. And there are 4,300 units in Chittenden County. And then I'll point out Franklin County has 800 units, just over 800 units. Washington's about 860, and there's a chart, they bounce around between a low of Grand Isle, 69 units, to, besides Chittenden, 1,200 in Rutland.
Got my magnifying glass on it.
I'm sorry.
The one question that question raises is, I suspect that even those that are distributed in other counties are often concentrated in particular towns. And in order to make up the difference of this savings, other taxpayers in those towns have to pick that up. And that's just a question in my mind of how significant that is to those localities.
We could ask. And I have a feeling that Winooski might be one of the towns that has a concentration. Maybe we could ask town managers for one or two of those towns. And this is a reduction in the grand list, not in the tax bill.
This is a reduction, 10% off their assessed value for purposes of calculating their taxes.
Right.
And
Okay.
so you take let's say, probably there's, I can think of one probably in Enosburg, for example, that might be more significant as a total amount of money to the town. So I just want to get an impact. Is there anybody who really gets hurt by this? Because every time you give a tax benefit to somebody, somebody else has to pay for it.
So let's figure out who you might want to hear from. I have a feeling it might be a bigger impact on a town with a small grand list than on one that has a larger. Yeah. So we'll get someone in.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Bray, did I see your hand?
Oh, just that Jill turned on screen sharing for Ms. Collins in case she wants to pop the map up.
I'm happy to. It's
I
not a map,
can't
but
the driver's license discussion for today, so we'll finish this up and then have a committee discussion on dispatch.
so I don't know if there are further questions on this, but you can see the chart by county of who's benefited from this over the last 20 years.
As you define a home, is that a building? You know, could some of those be fairly large apartment buildings, or are they individual homes, or?
These would be the units, and so it's apartments. So it could be one bigger multifamily building, or it could be, you know, duplex and scared site, smaller model.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Mara? Okay. Anything else we need to know?
My gratitude for considering this. And I guess the last thing I want to go back to Senator Brock's point about the impact on towns, that right now, this program was never envisioned to be sunset. It was envisioned to continue on. And so should this change not be made that the House passed, it means that we will continue to be operating this program as is. Which means, like I said, every year, more properties that are build affordable housing are eligible for this for the next 20 years. It's only those that have been getting this benefit for the last 20 years that would be impacted.
Okay.
And I'm sure if you take some testimony from the towns on the impact of this, I'm certain that there are affordable housing properties, Cathedral Square and others who are aware of this and would love to talk about what the impact of this would be on their tenants and budgets of these properties if this were to happen, if they were to lose this.
That might be a good source in the town. Okay, Senator McDonald.
Are these properties which ordinarily have heat included as part of the rent, or are they?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes, largely affordable housing usually it's rare to not have heat included in the rent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So committee, any other questions for Mara? If not, I'm going on to Karen Horn and Carol Dawes. So Karen?
Yeah, thank you. for having me in to testify. Karen Horn with the League of Cities and Towns. I apologize for the sunglasses. I've got eye issues going on, but I can still read sort of. I think that you had asked me and to talk, Carol and me, to talk about section 14, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of other sections. One of them being section 6, the wrongfully
Yeah, whatever
charged
you would like to testify
local
on,
option tax.
or is yours.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so we're fine with that section. I don't believe that it actually affects the municipality one way or the other. With respect to the issue of properties that are given tax discounts or property tax discounts or reduced values, that happens with a whole slew of properties, looking at Title 32 and read the tax expenditures report. We didn't really have any comment on that section at 13 either, although I do think it probably affects towns differently depending on where those apartments are. And we used to, when that was first put in place, we did have an assessment of what the impact was on every town. Section 14 is that you would, that the town would need to send tax notices about the homestead, send in the tax notices information about the homestead property tax credit and that it's available. And Carol can speak much better to this, but in general, towns don't differentiate when they send out tax bills about whether it's a homestead property or a non-homestead property. They send to everybody. We would just mention that the tax bill is already pretty crowded. I mean, there's a lot of information in there. So I think administratively, Carol is going to be able to speak better to that, on how they would not be able to handle
Because
that requirement.
I think when this was first presented, the law says that you had to put it in if it fit in the envelope. And this was just saying buy a bigger envelope, but it sounds like it might be more complicated.
I think it is somewhat more complicated than that, and there may be better ways to get that information out as well. So that's really all I have.
Okay, questions for Karen?
Thank you.
Get the emergency medical book. Okay, Carol Dawes is here. Welcome, Carol.
Committee, Carol, the Berry City Treasurer, and I'm also chair of the Vermont Municipal Clerk and Treasurer's Legislative Committee. And Karen teed me up well. I want to talk about Section 14, and my testimony is on your website, so I will truncate it because I know that everybody's very busy. Section 14 calls for the state to prepare and supply towns with a plain language description of the homestead property tax credits and eligibility requirements and deadlines. And I must admit, I chuckle a bit at the prepare and supply towns with language. I can't imagine that they're going to send me 5,000 pieces of paper that I'll have to put in with the tax bills. My guess is they're going to send me a PDF file, and my city is going to have to bear the cost associated with printing them and mailing them. We're concerned about that. We're concerned about the cost to the city or to the municipalities for having to provide this information. As Karen mentioned, the language in the bill says that these notices are to go to homestead properties. We don't separate when we bill. We bill to all our taxable properties. And so it would be pretty cumbersome to try to figure out how to sort out and put the notice in only with those homestead bills. So you say, okay, we'll just mail them to everybody. That of course increases the cost. And if communities put other items in with their tax bills, we certainly do here in Berry City. And it may be that an additional notice pushes us to the next postage level. So there may be additional postage costs on top of printing costs. The other thing that we're concerned about is, as Karen mentioned, the bill is already pretty full of information. We're required by the tax department to print a tax bill backer, which is a very dense bunch of information that's printed on the back of our tax bills, provided to us, again, as a PDF. So we bear the cost of printing by the Department of Taxes. But if you look at that particular tax bill backer, and it's attached to my testimony, it already contains a tremendous amount of the information that this bill calls for. I would say it's not what you would consider plain language, as is called for in Section 14, but it could certainly be revamped to be more user-friendly and to provide the information that the bill calls for. And it seems to me that would be a much more effective and cost-effective way to get the information out to people that the bill is looking for. I do have just a couple comments on Section 15, but I'll stop here to see if anybody has any questions on Section 14.
Okay. Sounds like a good idea, but it could significantly increase costs, or it would increase costs. If you push up your postage, could prevent you from putting notices you think your taxpayers should have. And you think that there's another place on the tax bill that could be used, the back of the tax bill?
The back, we're already sending out language from the Department of Taxes on the back of the tax bill. And it seems to me that that language could be revised to include the information that is being in the bill.
Okay, I think, Jill, see if the tax department can send us a PDF of the tax. You can do that. All right, we'll get the tax bill.
I've attached to my testimony a copy of that tax bill backer.
Oh, okay, so that is on our website. Thank you. Everybody can relax, okay. I'm working off the hard copy so I can make notes, so I don't have that up. All right. Okay, you want to, any questions for Carol on 14? We'll go on to 15.
15 is the section that would extend the application time for property tax credit claims. It would change the deadline from October 15 to March 15. And VMCTA supports this section of the bill. It would be especially valuable in those towns where tax bills are mailed later in the fall, or the first payment isn't due until after October 15th. We find that many homeowners don't open their tax bills until just before they're due. And if your first payment isn't due until the 1st of April, you've already passed the deadline and you don't have an opportunity to file the paperwork you need to make the corrections that are needed. So having that extension to the deadline is going to be a good service to our taxpayers. The fact that it's written in such a way that it's the Department of Taxes that will take up the burden associated with those that are filed, those that are filed after the 15th of October, but by the 15th of March. The towns won't have to do revised tax bills, won't be dealing with continuing reports or files from the state with state payments. That means that it wouldn't create any additional work on our behalf, but it certainly would be a benefit to our taxpayers.
Okay. Questions for Carol?
Not right
I'm
now?
not seeing it. Thank you. And we will take a look at the back of that card. I know we keep asking you to put stuff on there, and I don't know if we've ever told you you could take anything off. So maybe we could take some things off and put something on. And I'm just trying to figure out why at this point in time, Rebecca, did the tax department request this? Why are we doing this now? Is this, whose idea was this?
I know this came up when the bill was in House Ways and Means, and I can't remember exactly
Okay,
how, but it looks like
wait,
Karen
we-
does.
I think there was a request actually from VHA and legal aid. Part of the request was to addressing people with, you know, women who might be also getting some of the forgiveness for renter assistance, tax paying assistance program that you had last year that was federal money.
Yeah, but this is
No, I get that, but I do think
Yeah,
that that's
the
sort of
homestead
where
property
it came
tax
from. I think that's where it's sort of.
requirements and deadlines. I just would like to know why at this point in time, because that's hasn't changed with COVID and it's not changing. This is your property tax, you have to own a house. So I think we'll just ask them to come down and tell us why they did it now. I mean, I know when we've been trying to get schools to not vote their budgets or not raise their budgets, we put on all kinds of information about what your pupil spending is versus the state average spending versus, and last year we made, or 2 years ago, a couple of years ago, we made you divide out the school and the town tax credit. So you've got two separate sections of the bill. I'm not sure any of this is achieving anything in the way of altering taxpayer or voter behavior. And it is taking up a lot of printing. But I haven't seen any noticeable change in budget voting behavior, so we'll take a look at that, maybe we'll clean it up. Karen?
Are we finished with this particular issue?
I think so. Do we have any more questions on section 14 or 15? I'm not seeing any, so come on up if you got another issue.
I'm just wondering about whether the Senate Finance Committee will take up H 480, which is the reappraisal bill, and it's in the government operations
If
committee
it gets
right now.
sent to us, we will take it up.
But it seems sort of central to property taxation policy. And I would just put a plug in on behalf of municipalities for the finance committee to take a look at that.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
I will mention it to the pro tem. And see where we go with it. Okay. All right, I think that's it for this. I did cancel, did you? You did tell me, yes. H 53. Because I wanted to have some time to brief you on the meeting I had this morning with the chair of GovOps, the pro tem, and the chair of appropriations over dispatch. I think you know we've been working to get our head around it and we've had some concerns. They put a lot of work in and they are very, want to preserve the body of their work. I've been very concerned, and I think this committee has, that the towns are not bought in. And so this morning, we tried to work out a way to move this forward. And I presented the discussion we had yesterday about the transition section of the bill really needing to be what goes first, which is getting all the information on who's got what equipment, and we can, we can work with that. I gave Maria a heads up at noontime, just so she knew and could start thinking about how we might reorganize the bill. She suggested we might also want to do the second section of the transfer at the same time, which I think is personnel. So I told her to just take a look at this. What we agreed to is we will move the bill. We will leave the super board intact because that is, but we will move the bill. We will tell the enhanced E911 board. And I've said that I might try and get some more representation for towns, not 2 out of 12, because fire and police chiefs frequently represent the interest of their departments more than the interest of the taxpayers of their communities. So I didn't really consider them totally municipal representatives, so might get away with looking at that. The big thing is that there will be a hard stop. It will come back to us next year with the money and, with all the data. I also met with the league at noon because I wanted to let them know this is going forward, and I'm prepared to set a date that the state police are not going to be doing dispatch. And, let towns know you can't, because they've got a variety of towns. So it will come back to us, and then we will have, us being the legislature, we will have to decide if it moves to the next step. Since 10:30 this morning, I haven't gotten as far as the next step. I did talk with the league today. You were supposed to get notified.
I was supposed to, sorry.
Oh, okay, no.
No, all right. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, you too. So anyway, that is the skeleton of how we've agreed to move this forward.
Is there a summer study or something?
It'll go to Barb Neal, I think, and there is an $11 million, I found out where the 20 million is. This Leahy's got a grant. It has been appropriated to public safety. So Jane is gonna have to figure out how to get it back and how it gets appropriated. But it could, plus there's 9 of the general fund that got set aside last year. I think it was one-time money that hasn't been dispensed. So we can, and when I talked to Barbara Neal yesterday, and she said she's gonna need some subject experts to figure out how this got put in place. I did find out that the one big place that is an issue is Rutland. But that goes all the way up to White River because that's where the state police have been doing the dispatch. The old the Westminster Barracks, they are still doing dispatch. So that will be an area that we may want to say, and the board will present us next year with a proposal to provide service to that area. But basically, the outline is they keep the 911 board. You may monkey with it. We have their findings and recommendations come back to us next year. Then we'll know who owns the equipment, how much of it there is, where it is. I've told the appropriations chair this morning that right now there is no state commitment to this. We've got some federal money we're going to give you to get started, but there is no state commitment to having any financial or personnel or any issue. And I think that might be something, if this is a joint effort, a partnership, then that is something we're going to think about. It might be that they cover the expenses of the board.
I'm lost for a second, but by they, who do you mean?
The state.
The state, okay.
That we commit to covering that. It's quite possible. Because I talked to the towns think about a municipal district thing, how would this work? And take that to the House.
Are subject matter experts going to be employed to deal with, the variety of what's the structure, dealing with things like commonality of equipment, failover, all of the issues associated with a workable system?
Where is the equipment? Who owns it? How old is it? Can it talk to the guy?
Are they going to do anything regarding looking at governance or leaving it the
They're
way
going
it
to
is?
do what we tell them to do.
Well, I mean, those
And I
are
think
the
that,
issues.
those are the issues we have to work out. We can say, this is what we want you to do.
Like who's going to tell them who's going to be telling the subject matter expert what to do?
It, right now, will be the 911 board.
As the 911 board has expanded
I believe so.
with, additional.
I'm still trying to get the timelines down. This thing's got so many timelines in it. And we talked today, you were taking notes, you better at this than I am about.
Well, just a little bit about the timeline. So it would be the existing 911 board that would initiate the inventory, some of the design, some of the cost estimates that we talked about earlier, some of which is already in the bill, we're beginning that process. In terms of timeline, and there would be an advisory committee, that's that 17-member committee that would advise on the information that's gathered and any technical design standards or recommendations for the communication system generally.
That's different than the board, the Paul White board, I assume.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Paul White would be a member of the advisory committee. He's specifically named as the chair of that working group. So he's a member of the 17-member advisory committee advising the existing 911 board. In terms of when the new board, new public safety board would come into being under the bill now, that would happen next July 2024.
Mhm.
So, and then if you're moving forward, it would then continue the process of developing standards. So.
And we talked about towns, their election and funding cycle and how you got things out to towns. And, I think we will learn as we go through this, but basically towns just need something to hang their hat on. The big crisis will be the Rutland area, that when the state police pull out, and I don't think the state police want to be the bad guys and say, we're out of here, you're on your own. I think we're gonna have to do it. But I think we should charge the board to come back and say, okay, we've been down, we've talked to so-and-so, you know, this town, this sheriff, this private group, whatever, is willing to do dispatch service, but they're gonna need X, Y, and Z to do it and bring us back a plan, which we can then pay for.
Well, you know, the boards are good at getting in a room once every 2 weeks. Who's going to kind of shepherd this thing along on a hands-on, day-to-day basis?
I think that's going to be the hired field experts, and we have.
Contractor do it, as opposed to someone who's a state?
Sure. No, she said she had to hire subject experts. So I would not assume, I mean, we probably have some in-house expertise.
I'm just saying, who's going to manage this? And are
Right
you
now,
going to
I
assume
think
that
it's
an
Barb.
outside contractor is going to manage this entire process?
Right now, as it stands, it's Barb Neal unless we can come up with something else. I'm trying to be, as-
What is she?
she's the head of the 911.
Which,
She's a full-time employee.
Yes,
which
Yeah.
keeps a list of addresses and
well, there's a
answers the
computer.
phone.
No, they manage the PSAPs, which are the public answering centers. When you call 911, you go to one of their answering centers. The state police run 2 of them. There's 3 others. They then call your local dispatch. We're dealing with,
Theoretically know your address or.
well, the computer and your iPhone know all that, yes. There are flaws in that system. It's not perfect. I could see the ambulance, but I didn't know the street address of the church where the lady was passed out. But plus, this is, who do the state police call? They call the regional dispatch. Regional dispatch should know which fire, it's basically the state police dispatch police, because they are the police for a substantial part of the state. But your 911 call will go to your regional dispatch. They'll know, in this corner of Berlin, do I send the Barry police, the Montpelier police, or the Berlin police? Because these towns wrap around, who knows who's closer. And they will dispatch your local folks to where they're needed. 911 just takes those calls and transfers them to the local dispatch. So it's the local dispatch. And the more centralized we get that, the more manageable it is. Nobody can call every fire station in the state. And I'm not sure, you must call an answering service or alarm service to call out the local volunteers.
Well, you know, for any of this to be successful, I think you need a top-notch project manager, because you have all these moving parts, you have various organizations, you have, you know, this plethora of boards and board members, and you have departments that don't play well with one another. Getting an effective project manager, and I don't know whether Barb Neal has the capability to do that.
I don't either.
I mean, that worries me a bit.
She may have the ability. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we may need to talk to her about, is, because is what she wants to, she needs information from people with enough knowledge to know how to get the information and what information she may need. But you do need, yeah, you need somebody who is accountable to get this all,
You need a leader.
project manager.
You really need a leader.
Yeah.
Boards aren't good leaders.
No, boards are not set up to be leaders. No, I think they're looking at Barb. So, and
Who's they, by the way?
the committee across the hall that wrote this bill.
They got us into this mess.
I'm trying to move it forward so that everybody can work on it. And I'm not
You know, the
sure,
administration involved at all as to where they are in terms of this?
no, I do
'Cause I think
not.
that's a really critical piece.
I would like you could be our liaison to the administration.
I'll keep my hands off this thing.
I
don't
know, I
want
mean-
to touch this.
You know, I think, yeah,
To your point, I was thinking agency of digital services, like that's what they do is project management, and maybe they work in concert with the 911.
I was thinking, originally, I was thinking public service, the public safety department, because they have an emergency management division and they deal with emergencies.
they did talk to
Right.
them and they
And
were
they just don't
told
want to do it.
they didn't want to
And
do
that's
it.
the whole, that's been the problem for years. They just haven't wanted to do it, but regardless of the fact, they're best positioned to do it.
I mean, we could tell them we'd have to give them a lot of money to staff up. I'm quite sure if we gave them the money and the personnel, they might do that. But I'm not sure if the governor would even support that.
Well, what the government wanted to know is just a fundamental decision. Is this a state problem or is this a dispersed regional problem? And if it's a state problem, then
Well,
we
I
haven't
wa-
seemed to decide that yet.
As I said, I wasn't in on any of
Oh, I
the
know.
off-season discussions. The
I know.
first I heard of this was a week ago Thursday, when it landed. And I would like to get it in a position where the towns at least feel they can proceed forward, take what's best, and then move it forward, but have it go in stages. I mean,
We need to be a project plan
yeah,
and we need somebody in charge of it. It's pretty basic.
well, let's see if we can write that then, if you can help us think through it. I mean, there's just so much information to be gathered and so little time and essentially so little money. I mean, if you start hiring project managers, you get what you pay for and
Yeah, you do.
they don't come cheap.
You get the projects managed.
Yeah, but this is.
If you don't
hire
mention
project
ADS, that is a place that has project managers because they're used to having the one-off projects, IT projects and so on that fit some of that pattern.
My son
Learn
wants
part of
to
this
know.
is technology standardization,
Yes.
communication, so that's why I thought about.
If we choose not to hire a project manager, do we get a project managed?
It's how you define project manager. I think this is bigger than anything 911 has ever done.
Right.
It involves not just getting your lines up, but getting the towns to.
So we have someone in charge of something that's bigger than what they've ever done
Yeah,
and has a different bunch of challenges to it.
Or growth opportunity.
yeah. Okay, well, think about this while you're eating your Easter ham. Maybe I'll learn if I've got 14 people coming for dinner tomorrow or brunch on Sunday. I'm about to tell my children it is time.
Who's the project manager for that event?
My children have told me I should buy a ham and not worry about anything else. I am having a very difficult time not being the project manager.
Everyone at this
What are
table
we eating
commiserates with
and
your-
when are
your
we
dilemma.
eating it? I'm eating a lot of ham and that's it. But yeah, I mean, we need some, and that's it. This is all email, international email. So who's doing what when?
Senator Brock has been asking
Yeah.
questions in a way that's less offensive than others of us that might ask the same question. But we're-
Yeah, you ever.
And, we all wish we could turn the Manchurian candidate that would put his expertise to do what we want him to do. So, in a way, we would like him to do.
Okay.
Did you say, Chair, at the beginning that we are putting in the parking lot, so to speak, the funding formula and the positions instead of focusing on getting the commission? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we decided we'd take that formula out.
Yeah.
Because the league said, I can't explain it to my towns. They can't understand it.
Yeah.
It just makes it difficult to have the conversation. I think before we talk about a disbursement or collection formula, we need to know what we're collecting and dispersing. And we don't know that yet.
You gotta somewhere in all this process, come up with a plan, and you gotta come up with a number. Because you're never gonna get the towns comfortable until they know what it's gonna cost them.
Right.
And right now, we're dealing with Jello.
And they feel like we've just, this huge ball has been put in the top of the hill and it's just rolling down and it'll roll over them. And I think the most what we've done is say it's only gonna roll so far. And it's gonna stop and we won't pull that stopping
Right
peg out.
now, I'm concerned about the fragility of the entire system. And whether or not, as we, in effect, take another year to move to the next step, are there pieces of this that are particularly vulnerable that will need kind of emergency surgery? Now, that would be something
That-
theoretically that
yeah.
Barb Neal and company ought to know.
I mean, that's been my frustration with the maps. I mean, I keep looking at these things and nothing here tells me where is the danger zone?
Yeah.
Finally, they said, it's the Rutland area, because that's where the state police barracks, that's where the bulk of, okay, then we know that, we know that that's the place that when the police stop, that's our big chunk.
Well, it is and it isn't, because there you've got actually a real organization. I would be more concerned about some of the areas that are dependent upon sheriff's departments that may stop working, for example, like the Orange County situation. And that to me would be a greater vulnerability. Or than have, equipment that's about to fall over and no backup and no interoperability. That's where I would worry.
The inventory is gonna tell us that. And we won't know till we get it. At least where that is. I did tell them that this committee was particularly concerned about the ability of a sheriff or a town manager or, a town to say, that's it,
We're out of this.
we're out of this, it's too expensive, our neighbors just yell at us, we're gone.
Yeah.
And they said, well, first she said, well, the equipment goes to the state to set up another one. I said, wait a minute, the town bought the equipment, where does the state get to take that? And I guess the bill does say that they cannot cease until they have cease and desist providing service, until they have a dissolution plan that would get so they have to continue, they have to give notice that we're doing this. They have,
That each individual service is being performed, those people can't stop. Like the
no,
sheriff's.
yes, your sheriff cannot just say, that's it, we're not dispensing anything tomorrow. Because that's a vital service, and before they can do that, they have to give a dissolution plan saying, this is our plan, we're gonna step down, but we've talked to the neighbors or, the town board is willing to take, come in and take over the dispatch. But
And of course, I mean, you see the potential hole that they say, you told me you can't do it. Well, I did it.
yeah,
And I did it because I can't hire the people.
that is another issue,
So, I see that coming.
which is one of the reasons the state police want out is because they can't get the staff, and the staff they've got are so overworked, they're resigning. I mean, we're just in a death spiral, yeah. We've got a lot of death spirals going on.
Well, Senator Brock is asking the right questions. And someone, when the veterans wouldn't leave Washington DC after World War I, they got Douglas MacArthur, and he went and cleaned house. I'm not recommending that.
No, I was gonna say, you want us to turn out the National Guard?
No, I'm saying you have to.
Yeah.
It isn't gonna happen by itself.
No, it is not.
No.
And I'm prepared to put in the bill and say, as of January 1st, 2025, pick a date, the state police will no longer be doing dispatch. And every town will be responsible for providing dispatch services to their community.
If that's the decision that the legislature wants to make, and the other decision the legislature could make is that the state police will be responsible for dispatching services statewide on that date. There's another entirely different way to go.
I would do that too.
So,
That
and that's almost that's a fundamental decision as to who's going to be
And we
responsible
could-
for doing
Then
it.
we'd have to figure out how we assess, oh, they'd be doing all the dispatch.
How will,
The governor support that? Yeah,
how will this, how will
Provided
we
that, you know,
recommend get us one of those two choices?
Well, I mean, that was part of the whole idea of all of the study up to this point was to decide which way should we go and who should own and be responsible for this, because you can't decide anything until that decision is made. Now, I gather that from the work that's been done, the decision has been made to use a decentralized model, you know, on a regional or whatever basis. But as near as I can tell, I haven't read all the report, the Paul White report. I haven't read it all. So, you know, there may be stuff in there that I don't know about that really outlines how this is going to work and in a logical way.
well, I guess Paul White basically said the legislature has to
So,
decide.
I mean, that's what I gathered he said, but like I said, I haven't read all of the.
Yeah, I haven't
detail.
either. I started the other night. But it's, yeah, it's not an easy one. I told them we would get this out of here before the last week or two when everything gets crazy, which means the next 2 weeks. I thought we would vote out that license suspension bill unless there's real concern there, and then we'll get Senator Sears in. Other than that, we've got miscellaneous tax, which right now doesn't seem to have a whole lot horribly controversial on it. And well, I'd like to get captive insurance out next week. I'm just gonna have Maria in.
Yeah, just figure out how to raise a couple $1 billion to deal with all the spending.
Well, yeah, we gotta do that too. We do have the universal service fund that you mentioned, but everybody will want their cut of it. It will help, but it's not a fix. And I think that's it. We'll see. We'll try and get something put together on this. I want to give Maria a chance to maybe walk out some thoughts as to how we could go. I think a project manager might be a way we could spend some of the money. Then have project manager work under the director of E911. So she would be in charge of the liaison, but there would be a highly skilled, I would just say, where do we find one? Project manager.
If we have time to
Yeah.
hear from ADS, I'd love to know if ADS sees a fit for them to be part of the project management and coordination of the E911 board. If that's a moot point and they have no interest whatsoever, it seems like a good fit.
Okay.
Either that or give it to the community broadband board, but Christine.
They have full plan. Okay, that's it for today. Everyone